Good evening and welcome back to ParaGhoul Paranormal Discoveries from the Dark, the radio show where we dive into the shadows to see what lies beneath. I'm your host, KD Kulpa, and today we're continuing on the conversation with Melanie Cole. If you remember, she was on last week and we were talking about the mystery behind the murder of Scotty McLaughlin. Now, where we had to leave off last time, Melanie, you were just telling us about what people would say about Scotty. How some people said he was a nice enough man, while others commented on his anger issues when he had a drink in him. Can you let us know now more about the types of things that may happen when Scotty had been drinking?
And so there was a story of a party that he and Jonathan had at their place. And then a fellow there, I don't know what he'd done to offend Scotty, but he started trying to attack him and eventually chased him with a butcher's knife.
Ooh.
And they had to kind of pull him off. And like the fellow he had chased around was pretty scared. He was only, I think it was just like a 17, 18-year-old kid that he chased around with his butcher knife. But when he was questioned about it, they're like, oh, was he joking? He said he was not laughing. And like, he was terrified. So, and at one point, because they had a very fiery relationship from the start, John and Scotty. Scotty had gone into town and run up a bill at the general store and put it under John's name during the summer. And then he tried to do it again, but John had warned the store owner that this was not for him. And so he couldn't do it. And he came home and picked a fight with John and chased him with a cast iron frying pan.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So
An angry guy.
Yeah, to be fair to John, it's definitely possible that he had come out in a temper. Maybe he had found the letter that Olaf Evian had sent him to tell him that he was going to be the one to rent the farm and Scotty was going to be gone and he wouldn't have any more to do with it. It's possible that he just heard about it, or it's possible that he was just in a bad mood, or that all of it is made up. Like that's something we can never know for sure.
Yeah.
We only have John's word for it, and Scotty can't speak for himself anymore because he was murdered, obviously. So these are the stories we have to go on. So they did the coroner's inquest. They did a preliminary hearing, and he was committed to stand trial. And his trial was until March 24th, 1931, and it was held in Kindersley. And he was represented by a man named Alfred Bentz, not Diefenbaker. That was, I think something must have just got switched along lines in the rumors and that. But Alfred Bentz really tried his best with John, because it was already that they knew that John had killed Scotty. That question, he'd already confessed, they'd found the body, everything was above board. The big question for the jury at the trial was it self-defense or was it murder?
Yep.
Right? Because John pleaded not guilty. He said that it was self-defense. And the prosecutor, his last name was Rose, I believe, he was convinced that it was murder. He said, look at, he's huge. Scotty had this farm. He had all this stuff that now, coincidentally, John got when he disappeared. He was able to sell his horses. He had all this furniture. He had farm equipment. And John had said when Scotty left that he had given him $150 for him, as well as a promissory note for another $200 when he came back. Did he? Or was it made up? Was it just, we don't know. When they found the body, John had asked the Constable Carey, he said, did you find anything on the body? And he said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the $150. Did he have the $150? And he said, no, we didn't find anything. It would have been well disintegrated by that point. Yeah. So there's no proof of if he had actually given him money or not. So Rose believed that he had killed him for theft, that he wanted his stuff, he wanted his farm, and that Scotty pissed him off and that he killed him. Whereas Bentz was of the opinion like, hey, yeah, he's big, but Scotty has this reputation. He had, I think a couple years ago, he had attacked the same fellow, the Ernest Hagemeister, in town. They'd gotten into an argument over a pig, and he had attacked him. And Ernest was huge as well. He was 5'8", and he was like 240 pounds. He was a big guy. And Scotty was a little guy, and he had attacked Ernest, and Ernest had gotten the better of him because he was bigger.
Yeah.
And so he's like, this is not unusual. He had picked fights with bigger guys before. And John is just He's 20 years old at the time. This guy comes swinging at him with a shovel, and he was in fear of his life. He took one big swing. He was terrified, and then he panicked. And then did he screw up? Yes, he didn't tell anybody. He hid the body, and then of course he had to start lying about it.
Yeah.
Had to start making up like, oh no, he went to BC. He left. He took his bag, and of course this started a whole bunch of rumors because like Scotty had this special suit that then someone saw another man wearing at the stampede, and he's like, "Oh no, John told me I could borrow this suit," and like there's all these little things that started adding up over time that just made him look really, really bad. And so Benz's thing was like he made a horrible mistake in covering up this body, and then he had to keep lying to cover it up, and that was his error. But did he kill him out of malice? No, he was terrified. This guy's picking a fight with him. He happened to be holding the pitchfork. And it happened.
Yeah.
So then it goes to the jury, and they had a couple of options. They could find him not guilty. They could convict him of manslaughter, so not like a murder, not as bad, but where he reacted too strongly to what happened, or murder. And so they found him guilty of manslaughter, which was not as good as John was hoping for, but it wasn't going to get hanged. So he got sentenced to 7 years in the Prince Albert Penitentiary. And I don't know what happened to his wife and baby. I think she moved in with her family, and I'm not sure if they stayed together or when he got out, if they parted ways or what happened there, if she wanted to stay with him after this. They were both so young. I feel so bad for them. He was only, according to his marriage certificate, he was only 23 at the time of his trial. Like he was a baby.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so still a lot of life ahead of him after that 7 years. I couldn't find any trace of when he got out or what happened to him. I found on findagrave.com like that he might have moved back home to the States because that was where he's from originally. He had moved up into Canada to start farming when he was in his teenage years. He never finished his schooling, and even his brother at his own trial described him as kind of dumb. And so I personally think that he was just that he was a dumb, ignorant guy and didn't know his own strength and then did something really stupid afterwards. But again, like I could see where you can't prove it. But at the same time, they really didn't like each other. They really didn't like each other. So Scotty's head was kept in that Evans locker until 1996, and then it was reunited with his body. And Henry Gladstone, everyone was waiting for him, of course, to testify. He didn't testify at the coroner's inquest or at the preliminary hearing because he got actually quite sick after he helped find the body.
Oh.
Yeah, he ended up in St. Paul's Hospital for weeks after it happened. Apparently, according to him, he got really run down just from like doing this, and he became really ill, ended up in the hospital for weeks. And then when he moved home, he lived in Saskatoon at the time with his wife and their children. Their apartment went on fire, like the building started on fire. He was still in bed rest. He couldn't move. So he actually had to be rescued by a firefighter. So they had to carry him out. He wasn't able to leave the burning building. They lost everything. And so while all this is going on, while they're waiting for the trial, he went to Edmonton to help with a police inquiry there. And then, of course, so he's setting up interviews and shows at the Rialto while he was in Edmonton because he'd lost everything to a fire.
Yeah.
And there's actually a really weird mystery that was happening there at the time where this black retriever named Jip had found a human foot while it was out wandering. And they could not find the rest of the body. And it hadn't been treated with any sort of preservatives or anything. They didn't think it was from like a medical lab or anything like that. And so they asked Henry Gladstone while he was there where he thought the rest of the body was. And he goes, "It's in the water. I'll help you. I'll find it for you." Of course he didn't. As far as like this mystery was never solved, this weird human foot that was just turned up in this neighborhood that this dog found. But so he stayed in the papers, is what I'm saying. He added like a criminal investigator or something like that to his resume after the fact. Like he was like, I can now tell you about criminal psychology kind of thing. So he went on to more success and weird adventures as well. And I believe the judge on his trial actually died really suddenly in 1944 during World War II. He was put in charge of recruitment in Saskatchewan and died very suddenly of a heart attack. And yeah, that was kind of it. I lost the trail on John Schumacher. I wanted to know what became of him, but as far as I know, he served his time. He was released, probably went back to the States, and hopefully had a peaceful life if he was innocent.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully no more big fights in the barns.
Yeah. So that is the story of the haunted skull of the Corroborate Courthouse and the murder of Scotty McLaughlin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did they ever say why they think the skull made the place haunted?
No, I think it was kind of a headless horseman situation where Scotty was haunting the courthouse because he wanted his head to
Yeah.
be
Just
reunited
wanted
with
it to
his
be
body,
reunited. Yeah, maybe. Hey.
right? And especially to keep it until I think like I'll have to check my notes, but I'm pretty sure. Let me just pull it up here. Um, Pretty sure, yeah, it was 1996 that his skull was reinterred with his remains in Beachy. So no
Oh,
idea why they kept it so long, but
yeah. Especially, yeah,
but
1996. That's a long time after.
yeah, and apparently it's pretty spooky. They used to have some apartments in the courthouse where judges would stay while they were in town doing trials and that.
Yeah.
And one time there was a judge who was coming to stay, and his wife actually got there before him. And when he came, she was like, "This place is spooky. I don't like it here." And he's like, "Oh, you're crazy." And after a couple nights, they moved out. They were like, "No, we don't want to stay here." And they actually took a different place in town because they said they just could not sleep at night. There would be banging. Someone kept trying the door in their apartment. Like,
Oh, really?
yeah, and then they would open it and nothing would be there. And really, yeah, apparently really spooky stuff happening at the Robert Courthouse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did they say if it like stopped after his skull was removed?
No, they didn't. They didn't.
Oh,
I think that because here's the other thing. Well, that was their main reason for thinking it was haunted. There was also a couple of jail cells in the basement, and so
okay.
their thinking was that maybe one of the prisoners there, maybe somebody died, and then, so
Oh,
that was
maybe.
their kind of the backup reason for why it was haunted. Was that maybe someone had passed away in the prisoners' barracks or just haunted the place where they met their fate, kind
Yeah.
of.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Hmm.
Spooky.
Yeah.
So when you found
I,
out whose head it was, did you like tell them or did they already kind of know? It sounds like they didn't know whose skull it was.
I had reached out to them initially when I was first interested to get more information because I was not finding anything, and no one ever got back to me.
Yeah.
So the reason that I ended up solving the mystery was actually someone at CBC. I was on. They had me on the radio there, and she had
Oh,
tracked down a copy of their old history book, which had way more details about the hauntings and like what they experienced and who it was, who it belonged to. And so they did have more information. They knew it was this particular crime.
okay.
So I think it's just more in the telling and the retelling. They didn't
They
put a lot
lost
of
track.
details on their website too. I imagine they weren't like, so this is the murder, which is what
Yeah.
I would do. I'd be like, here are all the gruesome details because that's the part I'm interested in.
Yeah. Oh. So I guess since then, since that one kind of sparked your interest, do you have any like how many articles have you done so far? Because I know I've read quite a few of them on your website.
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure. A lot.
Yeah, you found I know I've read quite a few of them. There's a lot that has happened in
Yeah.
Saskatchewan.
I was doing them every week and then things got really busy at work and I had some of the projects I was working on. So then now I do them maybe once a month. Um, because it's such a time commitment to try and research them. So like with this one with the murder of Scotty McLaughlin, I actually did quite a deep dive. I got the coroner's inquest report. I've got the court records. I got the police records. Um, and like the transcripts from the preliminary hearing and all
Oh,
the
wow.
newspaper articles. So,
Yeah,
and that it takes a long time to get all
that
those
would. Yeah.
documents, because the provincial archives are very, very good and they're very, very nice and they're very, very helpful, but they're very overwhelmed with requests. So you wait like a good 6 months to get anything.
Yeah.
So It's just not something I can do all the time for any of my other articles. Most of the time, I just go with newspaper accounts, which don't give all the details, but at least let me tell the story.
Yeah.
But with this one, I've done like a much deeper dive. So
Yeah. Have you ever thought about like making stories with any of this information, or because I know you said you like to write, so
I would, I've been playing with the idea of like a fictional historical mystery set in Saskatchewan because there's a someone that comes up a lot in my research. Her name was Dr. Frances McGill, and
okay.
she was the provincial pathologist in the 1930s, which is crazy because she was a woman. Um,
Yeah.
and she did a lot of the postmortems and that on murder victims in Saskatchewan. She comes up a lot, and so I have thought about doing like a historical murder mystery series, kind of from someone inspired by her in Saskatchewan at that time. I think it would be really fun,
That would
but
be a cool, yeah, that would be a cool read for sure.
because she had access, she had a lot of murders to investigate.
Well,
So,
yeah.
and
Was
she
there
has a lot of
any,
really crazy stories too. So,
yeah, I was gonna say, was there any like really crazy stories in Saskatchewan that you wouldn't have expected to happen in Saskatchewan?
well, I definitely didn't expect there to be one where a mentalist solved a murder. That was crazy.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
there was actually another one that really surprised me was there was a really vicious axe murder in Saskatoon in 1925 on Christmas night,
Ooh.
and it was never solved. And the main suspect was this man's wife. I don't think she did it from everything I've read. I'm like, no, but it's kind of a little bit of a Lizzie Borden-esque murder where
Oh, really?
you're going, could she have done it? How could she clean up in time? But maybe she could have. And yeah, it's a really twisted, interesting mystery of a story as well, with a lot of like untied loose ends that make me mad that I'm like, why didn't they investigate this part of it? Because it's so there that one was really interesting as well. And then it's just a lot of really sad domestic abuse stories,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And then there are some weird ones. There is one the Yorkton hammer killing where a guy just apparently just kind of lost the thread and just at the end of the day just went behind his boss and hit him in the back of the head with a hammer, like in front of his wife. He's holding his baby
Oh my
and
goodness.
then went running and was like, no, I didn't do that. I have no idea what you're talking about. But his
Oh,
wife saw him.
wow.
So
Yeah. Yikes.
so there's a lot of really interesting stories for especially for someone like me who really likes to get into the nitty-gritty of the how and the why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah, especially a Lizzie Borden kind of story in Saskatchewan. Who would have thunk of that?
Right? It's really is kind of because she never went to trial. They charged her with the murder, but it didn't end up going to trial. They just did like a stay and then they just never ended up bringing it to trial. So they had the possibility of bringing it to trial for the rest of her life. They never
Yeah.
took it back, but they never did end up actually putting her on trial for his murder.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Hmm. Do you find it? Well, yeah, we kind of talked about like it's the Saskatchewan archive is great, but yeah, they're very backlogged with requests. And
yeah.
but you said you have found things like the court hearings and the
The
transcripts and
coroner's
stuff.
inquest reports have been a godsend. The coroner, office of the coroner, have been really nice.
Oh, really?
They send me, well, yeah, because I mean, they're historical documents. Like occasionally they're like, we have to look it over in case there's anything sensitive or,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I mean, especially from like the 1930s, like it's not going to besmirch someone's name at this point to
Oh, yeah.
release the inquest. And so those have like transcripts of interviews with people and which is really nice. I like to try and get the words from the horse's mouth because the other thing is with newspaper, well, and even with the coroner's inquest report, like I get emails all the time from people who are like, "Oh, I know these people. My family's from that area. By the way, you got so and so's name wrong and so and so's name wrong," and I'm like, "Yeah, the newspaper was not concerned about getting
Yeah.
people's names right or spelled correctly." So
Yeah.
I do a lot of updating when people email me to be like, hey, just so you know, I'm pretty sure you mean this person. That's not their name. This is their name. And I'm like, yeah, bet you're right.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how people I was in a previous episode, I was talking with Kenton and Dylan because they do Canadian mysteries now. And that was,
Hmm.
they said the biggest thing for them was whenever they touched anything that was true crime related, they'd get a whole bunch of emails. Well, you did this wrong. You did this wrong. So you find that too, that if you do have anything wrong about the facts, you're getting emails about it?
Yes, everyone who's emailed me has been so polite and very, very lovely. Single person has just been like, "Hey, I'm so glad you wrote about this. This was my great grandmother, and no one in the family talked about what happened to her." And I get a
Oh,
lot of those where people reach out and they're like, "Thank you so much for writing about this. Like, this is something that nobody in our family spoke about. I never knew what happened. I always wanted to know what happened," that kind of thing.
oh, wow.
So yeah, and like so I get a ton of those, and then I get people who are just like, "Hey, by the way, I love your articles, but his name was actually Pete," like, and so I'm like, "That's always welcome. Don't mind at all. That's no problem." I think I maybe got one person who was kind of a jerk, and I didn't. It wasn't even a correction. They just didn't like how I ended some of my blog posts. They're like, "You don't end it like that. I don't like the way you write that," and I'm okay. Then don't read them.
Yeah. You're always gonna get one, at least one of those,
Taken,
right?
but unfortunately, yeah. So, but on the whole, like that's actually probably been one of the most surprising experiences. Is I have like a Facebook group, my historical Saskatchewan true crime Facebook group, which has like 3,000 people on it,
Oh, cool.
and they are so lovely. Everyone on there is kind of same with me. They want to be an armchair detective. We like to discuss theories. We want to be like, "Oh no, that guy did it for sure," or
Yeah.
and it's been so fun to have all those people tagging people like, "Oh, so and so, did you know this happened in your town?" And it's been super fun.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fun. It's funny, yeah, how
Yeah.
true crime brings people together. It's such an odd thing, but I find that too. It's amazing how true crime does that.
Yeah, it's always like a specific kind of person. Like I've definitely ruined many a family dinner um with with just like, what this reminds me of.
Oh, gee. Yeah,
But
I
there's
can't.
certain
It
people
happened.
that their
I
eyes light up when you start to
Yeah.
say that. They're like, "Tell me more, all of it."
Yeah, I tend to do that too with my ghost stories. It's funny that people, as soon as you talk about, oh, I tell ghost stories or I collect ghost stories, and then everybody wants to tell you their ghost story. So I always
Mhm.
get to hear them, which is
That's
fun.
so true. If you mention ghosts, if anyone's ever had even like a just a whiff of an experience, so like, let me just tell you my tale.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So this has been awesome. But I guess before we sign off, is there anything else you want to like talk about or future projects
Mm.
or anything kind of else you want to let everyone know about?
Well, I think just inviting people to visit my website, melaniecole.com. Anything of note is going to appear there. So that's where I post my true crime stories. No longer every week, unfortunately, but I try to get them up whenever I can. As well as if I have anything come up, I will be posting it there. You can also visit me on my Facebook group, the Historical Saskatchewan True Crime. If you are someone who loves true crime or Saskatchewan history, I think you'll find a really fun place there and a good group of people. Um, and as for any upcoming projects, I mean, I will always have upcoming projects.
That's the
I'm
way I
someone
am
who
too.
likes to be busy. Yeah. I have a mind that likes to whirl around and put a bunch of stuff in the air. So I am working on possible like books in the future. Who knows? We'll see. But again, it's way too far in the future to say that anything's going to come of any of those ideas. But hopefully someday, one day, I will join you in the ranks of published. Um,
Yeah, that'd be exciting.
yeah. When does your book come out?
So mine comes out September is the plan, middle of September.
That's exciting. What is it called?
That one so far it's called Coma. I don't know
Cool.
if we're going to change the title or not, but so far it's still called Coma.
Titles are the hardest part for me.
So hard. And I find
They're
out
so
most of
hard.
my titles are one word. It's just one word. That's all I've got. One word.
Well, all my true crime articles, I'm always like, you can't say the murder of so and so again. You need to be a little bit more creative.
Oh, yeah, I guess, hey.
But at the same time, I'm trying not to make it too flashy or I'm trying to get attention, but like accurate.
Yeah.
Because that's part of why I write about the historical true crime rather than anything current, is I just don't want to feel like I'm using victims of crime for entertainment.
Yeah.
I think that's something with the true crime genre that we all have to be really, really careful of, is remembering that there are victims and they have families, and some of those family members are still around and they don't need to hear about it from us.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. That's a very good point. Well, I
yeah.
imagine
So,
it's probably easier doing historical too because the cases are either closed or long since cold.
yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit more satisfying because you're not waiting to
Yeah.
see um how things are going to pan out. But the ones that are unsolved, they will get you. There is no chance of it getting solved, which is
Yeah.
like that axe murder in Saskatoon. Oh, I might have to do a very deep dive on that one because that was a yeah, that's tantalizing. That's the only problem is you'll never actually find your answers. Probably you might get a theory, but that's the closest
Yeah,
you're
that's
gonna
close
get.
you'll
So
get.
yeah.
That's
Which
cool
again,
though.
same with ghost hunting, right? Like we can
Oh yeah.
theorize and we can enjoy and we can tell the stories and we can do our research, but can we prove it?
Well, that's always the hard part, right? Yeah. You can
Yeah.
make really good guesses, but whether or not that guess is real. Yeah.
Oh, and I'll tell you too, for your listeners, I had already posted about the Scotty McLaughlin murder on my website, but I'm going to be posting an updated with all the details I uncovered with my deep dive. I'm going to kind of re-release it with way more information. So
Oh,
I'll
good to
try and
know.
release it kind of when this episode comes out. So if you're listening to this episode and you want to read it for yourself, then head over to my website, melaniecole.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. It's always fun to talk murder with people who are
Yeah.
also not terrified to talk about murder.
Wow, that was a fascinating account of the murder of Scotty McLaughlin. Thanks again to Melanie for coming onto the show. Hopefully, she can come back and let us know more about some of those other true crime mysteries that we alluded to tonight. And thanks to you for joining us tonight. Don't forget, if you'd like to support the show, you can find me on most social media platforms under KDKULPA. I also have a Patreon for those that want behind-the-scenes information, extra content, and a chance to join a live Q&A with me each month. Next week, we'll be returning to where we left off in our discussion of the history of the paranormal. We will be talking about the start of seances, hoaxes, and that weird occurrence of ectoplasm which had me falling down a rabbit hole the last time we chatted. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we'll uncover more secrets, unravel more mysteries, and delve deeper into the shadows. Until then, remember to keep your flashlight handy and digital recorders ready. This is Katie Kulpa, signing off. Until next time, my ghouls.